email attachment is valid, it's going to look like this, file.vbs. Simple. So from the other side of the graph, how we had the big diagram there before, we see here with those first two test cases, all the products stripped them, no worries. But as soon as we started playing with it a little bit more, remember we had the 2 ticks in the front, file.vbs, proof point, oh, what do I do with that? I'll just let it through. Similarly, Trend Micro, Surf Control, Sophos Pure Message, we'll just let that through. Now, if this was a executable file like file.exe and it had the MZ header, then the chances are these products are going to be able to strip it because they're just looking for the MZ pattern. As soon as they see that, they look inside the MIME boundaries. Here's where the attachment sits. I'm going to pull it straight out. But because it can't do any file type checking, it's got to rely on looking for that attachment extension name to strip the file. And it's seeing these double quotes and going, what? There's no file name at all. And it just lets it through. Okay, and this is what it looks like as you'd expect when the attachment is stripped. Okay, so the next thing I did, or one of the other test cases, was a different file name. So here in the content disposition, we've got test.txt, and in the content type, we've got test file.vbs. Now what's the email client going to do with that? Is it going to render it as test.txt, which I'll be able to double click on it, but it won't be a VBS file, it will just be the VBS code? Or will it show me file.vbs? Similarly, file.vbs and test.txt in the opposite order. I also had it pointed out to me that if you flip content type and content disposition actually around, so the first line is content type and the second line is content disposition, that also fools the clients and the filtering software, or more so the filtering software than the clients. Or how about having 2 content dispositions? Yeah, that also messes with it. But I didn't test that, I just got told it after the fact. Okay, so test case 1, we've got test.txt file.vbs, and Outlook Express, it's choosing the VBS file, so it's choosing the second one. So is Outlook 2000, 2003. Lotus Notes and Thunderbird, they play with test case 2, so they choose the one out of the content disposition rather than the content type. So there's some interesting results here. The iImport developers seem to be using Thunderbird or Lotus Notes as an email client to test these things. So they're thinking, oh, this attachment isn't visible in Thunderbird, so why should we strip it, perhaps? Or maybe they're just not even thinking about stripping it. The likes of MailMarshal and Trend Micro, they know that there's a malicious VBS file in there somewhere, perhaps, so they strip both lots. Symantec, I think they're all away on holiday when all this stuff was going on, because they don't strip anything there. Okay, Nullbyte. This is another same bug, different app. So I've got, you can see here on the right hand side, we've got file.vbs, and then I'll put a null in here, and then we've got .txt. So what's the content filtering product going to do with that? Is it going to read that string in, and as soon as it hits the null, it's going to go, oh, this is a malicious VBS file, I'm going to strip it? Or is it going to read the whole string in and think, oh, this is a text file, I'm going to let it through? Similarly, is the email client going to read it all in and think, oh, I've hit the null, that's it, file.vbs? So you have to think, or the email client is going to probably do something different from the SMTP filtering product. So here's the results of that. So there's quite a few gaps in there. You can see with test case number 2, that I'm not sure which test case, this might have been test case number 1 or 2. No, it was number 2. Lotus Notes didn't like it, but all the other clients did. MailMarshal, he must have been reading right the end to the text file. Yeah, but it's rendered in that client. Similarly there in test case number 5, sometimes I was base64 encoding the null or quoted printable encoding the null. I fiddled around with it a whole bunch. So you can see it would be fine Lotus Notes. Quite a few banks, especially in New Zealand, use Lotus Notes, so it's quite a good target. Surf Control, that strips it. And it looks like code theft and reuse isn't a problem.
Have you tried the reverse too? First the text extension, then the nullbyte, and then the
Yes, yeah. So with the nullbyte one here, there was 7 test cases. Number 1 was originally, it was stripped by all vendors, and it didn't render in all clients. So this is just one of the test case examples. I did modify it 7 different times using different flipping and such. Yeah. And the thing about code theft and reuse, normally if code theft and reuse was a problem, you'd see some vendors would have exactly the same results as the others for all of the test cases. So I've got the accompanying white paper here, which will be available on DeepSec website and on my website, and you'd assume for all the test cases here, if they'd stolen, like the Sophos pure message code is written in Perl, so you can easily download it and you can just turn it into your application. But that doesn't seem to be happening here, which is a good thing. If I had probably looked at some Chinese products or some other country who are like stealing code perhaps, then you could see a bit of reuse, but it doesn't seem to be a problem. Simple bugs. So UU encode. We all know what UU encode is. We've UU encoded file names before. This command first appeared in BSD4 in the 1980s, and these 3 vendors here can't strip UU encoded attachments. It's pretty poor. The strange thing is these are the 3 vendors that have Unix-based appliances. So you'd think they'd know. Okay, so across the board, after I did all my test cases, 58 test cases, here's the results. So for the email clients, Thunderbird can render the most wacky, malformed, trippy email attachments with 72% success rate. And the old Outlook Express 6, it wasn't so flash, in Outlook 2003. And Lotus Notes, that was the worst. Or was it the best? Should we be rendering these attachment file names? So I think the reason that a lot of these clients here are rendering these malformed attachments is due to broken applications. There's so many different applications out there that have been written poorly, and we'll get, say it's a web server or something that's flicking out email notifications about website updates, and it's got an attachment on it, but it's a bit malformed. Someone's gone back to Microsoft and say, hey, I really need to read this attachment. Can you fix up your client so it works with it? And so that's what they probably have done, just to be nice to their users, for user friendliness' sake. And there's also RFC compliance. RFC 2231, for example, is a standard where you can have your file name, if it's longer than 255 characters, split up into multiple content dispositions. So you've got file name 0, like an array, equals the first 255 characters, then the second 255 characters. Now this RFC's been around maybe 5 or 6 years, but only Thunderbird's adopted it. It's kind of a strange one. And nearly, if we look at the global results here, if we get down to RFC 2231, yeah, there we can see that only Thunderbird renders these attachments, wherever my mouse pointer's gone. This line of 1's here, and then only IronPort, and I think the other one might have been Proofpoint, can strip them. So it's a kind of a strange thing. I don't know why Thunderbird adopted it and installed it, because there's perfectly valid workarounds for the problem. Okay, now look at the boundary security products. Now, a higher score here is better. You want to be stripping these attachments. We can see Proofpoint and IronPort, they're down below 50%, which is kind of bad. Sophos, yeah, 52%. And then we've got ClearSwift, a clear leader, with 84. And then Trend Micro, 83. Not too bad. Okay, so what I did with these results, if you're familiar with the Gartner Magic Quadrant, you've got your, as we had at the start, we've got the niche players and the visionaries and the leaders. So I was loath to what the salesperson would do with my results. They're going to say, oh, we got an 84% in Simon Howard's attachment stripping, bypass, filtering, blah, blah, blah. So I constructed Necromancer's quadrangle that they could use in their sales reports if they wanted, but they'd look kind of silly. So we've got ClearSwift up the top there. Those guys are pretty proactive. They're keeping an eye on Z-Raz's bypass filtering paper and seeing what you guys are saying in the industry. Trend Micro are good as well. Monorail, so the Surf Control and Sophos, they've got the deaf-in one here. They're kind of listening to what's going on. They've got some mitigation strategies there, but they're not really working on it. Amnesic, Ironport, Semantic Proofpoint, all the way back in 2002 when Marks and Ackerman notified them of these issues, they responded to these guys saying, I think Ironport were the only one who weren't around back then, or they in a different guise. They said, yeah, we've fixed it, we're keeping an eye on it, we've sorted it out. But in reality, they probably did it for those first test sets back in 2002. Come 2007, they're not really keeping an eye on it. And I can probably see people from that amnesic space moving into the reactive column as threats are realized, as viruses start using these techniques, and then popping back into the amnesic column when they've fixed that problem, but they're not really forward thinking, not being proactive about it. So that's just a quick definition of those terms. So what are the implications for this? Well, viruses and lots of them. There's already been some viruses using these techniques in the wild. Surcam, Badtrans, Jibe, it's like some of them have had the multiple file name extension, like you've got filename.doc.exe. So they're kind of pretty basic transforms on those bad attachment file names. Pattern-based virus detection, we've already seen lots of great talks about why it doesn't work and why it's not going to stop this kind of thing. Heuristic and sandboxing may work to stop these threats because depending on how they pull out that attachment from inside the body of the email message, they may be able to execute and know, hey, you're calling these, why you're trying to connect to a website or send an email. But when you've got virus writers and you've got virustotal.com, you've got new viruses and new variants that are undetectable basically, or that for the period of time will be undetectable. And we've seen examples of that today as well. All they need to do is set up, keep modifying them and sending them through VirusTotal until it's undetectable. Or they could create a magic email. So get the content, so look at go back to the PDF here. So if they don't really know what email client the target is using at the other end, they could choose a content disposition, one that gets past most of the filters, and multiple file name one, and put all those three malformed attachment names into one email, send it through, and chances are it's going to get your Lotus Notes, it's going to get your Outlook, it's going to get your Thunderbird, and it's going to get past all of the SMTP filtering products out there. So in conclusion, after looking at all those vendors and getting the results back, the majority of them aren't listening. We've got about a 51% success rate across the attachment stripping techniques for these vendors. How do we make them listen? Like, we pay a lot of money for these products. Take your business elsewhere, or tell them it is an issue. Like, for example, one of our vendors back home, I always beat them up and say, look at these bugs, look at these problems here, and they come to us at the end of the year and say, hey, we'd like to raise the support contracts by $20,000. And I say, and I write up the paper of all my findings and all these bypass techniques, and then send it over to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, you can stay in your current contract, don't worry about it, extra 20 grand. So you have to make them listen. Or I could sell my research to the Storm crew or post it on 29A, but that's just going to make more trouble for me because I'm the one at the end who has to deal with all this crap coming through my system. I wouldn't do that. Okay, so ideas for further research. I'd like to test all the web-based email clients like Gmail. I did try Gmail with this test set and it's pretty damn good. So as soon as you're sending the email through, as soon as it sees that